Harlen Vance had exactly $12 in his wallet, a half-eaten granola bar in his glove box, and a 6-year-old daughter who believed in fairy tales more than he did. He tightened the straps on Ellie's sparkly silver shoes and kissed her forehead as she beamed up at him. "You look like a princess, Daddy," Harlen chuckled, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. "That makes you the queen." They were standing outside the community center of Westmont. The mayor's annual charity gala was the town's one night a year to pretend it was fancier than it was. Harlen hadn't planned to attend. He didn't have the time, the money, or the right clothes, but Ellie's school had been chosen to perform their winter recital here, and she had begged him to come. So he had borrowed a suit from his neighbor, who was 2 inches shorter and 10 pounds heavier. Inside, the room glowed with warm golden chandeliers and laughter. Harlen hovered near the back of the ballroom, holding a cup of punch like it was a shield. Parents in cocktail dresses mingled with city officials. Harlen didn't know anyone here. Ellie had run off with her class, squealing in delight over cookies shaped like snowflakes. He was about to slip out when a woman walked straight up to him like she already knew his name. "You look like you want to disappear," she said, stopping right in front of him. Harlen blinked. She was stunning long chestnut hair, a crimson satin dress that shimmered under the lights, and the kind of confidence that made him feel like he'd wandered into the wrong dream. "Only a little bit," he said, trying to keep it light. "I'm Fallon," she said, extending her hand. "Harlen." He took her hand, surprised at how soft it was and warm. They stood there for a beat, her eyes scanning his face like she was reading something important. "You here alone?" she asked. He glanced around. "Sort of. My daughter's here with her class." "She's the one who dragged me in with her glitter shoes and those eyes I can't say no to." Fallon smiled, and it wasn't polite, it was real. "That's sweet, or pathetic, depending on how you look at it." "I'll go with sweet," she said, tilting her head. "You dance?" Harlen almost laughed. "Not well. Perfect," she said, then gently tugged his hand. "Come on." He followed her onto the dance floor, trying not to look like a guy who hadn't danced since his wedding 7 years ago. But Fallon moved easily, like she belonged in grand rooms like this one. She didn't talk about herself, didn't brag, didn't ask what he did for work, which was good, because he didn't love admitting he was currently fixing cars at a garage he didn't technically own anymore. "I'm pretty sure I'm stepping on your feet," he muttered. "Doesn't matter," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "I haven't smiled like this in a long time." Something about her tone made his chest tighten. He wanted to ask her why, but the music changed, and Ellie came running back toward them with frosting on her chin. "Daddy." "You danced." Fallon reached down with a napkin, gently wiping Ellie's face. "And he was great." Ellie grinned, then looked up at Fallon. "Are you Cinderella?" Fallon laughed. "Not quite." Harlen watched as Fallon knelt to Ellie's level, chatting with her about glitter and cookies and tiaras like she'd known her forever. Most women didn't even pretend to care, but Fallon wasn't pretending. After the recital ended, Harlen found himself walking Fallon to her car. The car turned out to be a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who stepped out the moment she approached. Harlen blinked. "You have a driver?" Fallon paused. "Yeah, I didn't want to deal with parking." "Big city habit." She looked like she was about to say more but didn't. Ellie tugged on Harlen's sleeve. "Is she a princess?" Fallon crouched again and whispered something into Ellie's ear. Whatever it was made Ellie gasp and giggle. "Okay," Harlen said slowly. "What did you just tell her?" Fallon winked. "It's a secret." Before he could ask anything else, she climbed into the car, the door closing behind her like the end of a chapter he didn't know he'd started. By the time he got Ellie into bed that night, Harlen still couldn't stop thinking about Fallon. The way she looked at him. The way she talked to Ellie like she mattered. The way she didn't flinch when he said he was just a dad. He didn't know her last name. He didn't know where she lived. And he sure as hell didn't know that Fallon was a billionaire. Because who would ever guess that the woman in red, who danced with a struggling mechanic and wiped frosting from a 6-year-old's face, had an empire waiting for her on the other side of a boardroom. Fallon Jensen didn't plan to fall in love with Harlen Vance, but she had. And she didn't know it yet, but she was about to turn his whole world upside down. 3 weeks later, Harlen was under the hood of a rusted-out Civic, sleeves rolled to his elbows, grease streaked across his knuckles. The December wind cut straight through the open bay doors of the garage, but he barely noticed. He was too focused on the ticking sound near the alternator and the woman he hadn't seen since the gala, Fallon. He hadn't expected her to stay. People like her, elegant, polished, with laughter that sounded like it belonged in a movie theater, didn't linger in places like Westmont. She probably had a full life in some gleaming high-rise with people who wore suits on Saturdays and actually knew which fork to use at dinner. But he hadn't been able to stop thinking about her. Harlen, his boss barked from the other side of the garage. "You've got someone up front asking for you." He wiped his hands on a rag and pushed through the swinging office door, expecting a customer with a complaint or worse, a bill. Instead, Fallon stood there like she'd been plucked out of a five-star magazine spread and dropped into the oil-stained reception area. Her coat was tailored, her boots looked like they hadn't seen a puddle in their life, and her hair was swept into a low twist that somehow only made her look more unreal. Harlen stopped short. "You," he said, stunned. "I was hoping you'd say that without the look of horror," Fallon replied, her voice lighter than he remembered. "But I'll take it." "What are you? How did you?" "I asked Ellie's teacher," Fallon said. "She's surprisingly forthcoming when you donate 20 new tablets to the school." Harlen blinked. "You bought the school tablets." "Technically, the foundation did," she said with a shrug, "but I was the one who signed the check." He leaned against the counter. "Why?" "I owed her a secret for not telling you what I whispered at the gala. You bribed my kid. I call it strategic generosity." She smiled, but there was something behind it, hesitation, maybe even nerves. He hadn't expected that from her. "So," he said slowly, "you tracked me down. Are you here because my daughter extorted you into a second dance, or—" "I came to ask if you wanted to have dinner with me." Harlen stared at her. "You want to go to dinner?" "With me? Yes, I fix cars, I'm aware, I live above a laundromat, I don't care. I can't afford anywhere that takes reservations. I'll make them." He blinked. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," she said, then added, "though that's a terrible phrase. I should stop using it." Harlen studied her for a moment. "You're not like anyone I know." "I'll take that as a yes," he hesitated. "I'd need someone to watch Ellie." "I already thought of that," she said. "My assistant, she's great with kids, used to teach kindergarten. She's certified, background checked, and I'll have her come early so you can meet her first. Just dinner. No pressure." He exhaled, long and slow. "You're really not going to let me say no, are you?" Fallon stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Not when I haven't stopped thinking about you since I left Westmont." The silence stretched between them, thick with something neither of them wanted to name. "Okay," Harlen said finally. "Dinner?" That night, Fallon arrived at his place, technically a cramped two-bedroom above a dry cleaner, with peeling paint and a heater that creaked like it was haunted. She didn't flinch at any of it. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor in Ellie's room, chatting with her like they were old friends while Harlen hovered in the doorway watching them. The assistant Lena arrived not long after, and true to Fallon's word, she was warm, professional, and clearly adored kids. Harlen stayed long enough to see Ellie settle in with a movie and a mountain of pillows, then followed Fallon downstairs. Outside, a town car waited at the curb. He opened his mouth, but Fallon held up a hand. "Don't say it," she said. "We'll drive somewhere nearby." They ended up at a new restaurant on the edge of town, one of the only places that had tablecloths and real candles. Harlen had never been there. Fallon seemed to know the owner by name. "You've been here before," Harlen said as they slid into a booth. "Once," she said. "A few weeks ago, I wanted to see what Westmont was like outside of a charity gala." He studied her. "So you've been coming back." "I've been figuring some things out." Their waitress brought drinks, sparkling water for her, a local beer for him. Fallon waited until the woman disappeared before speaking again. "I didn't lie to you," she said carefully, "but I also didn't tell you everything. I figured. You deserve to know who I am." Harlen nodded. "Okay, I own a company. Several, actually. I'm on the board of 2 hospitals, and I spend most of my time managing investments and acquisitions." He raised an eyebrow. "So, you're rich, exceptionally." He let that sink in. "So, that car," he said, "the driver, the coat. The tablets, all me." Harlen didn't say anything for a moment, then he leaned back in the booth. "You could have led with that." "I could have," she agreed. "But then you might have looked at me the way most people do." And how's that? Like I'm a number. Harlen looked at her, really looked at her. The woman across from him wasn't glossy or aloof. She was nervous, hopeful, maybe even scared. I don't care about your money, he said. Her eyes flicked to his. You should. Why? Because it complicates things, he nodded slowly. Maybe, but so does falling for someone you weren't looking for, her breath caught. You didn't have to come find me, he continued. But you did. That matters more to me than any balance in your bank account. Fallon didn't answer right away. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. I meant it when I said I haven't smiled like that in a long time. He squeezed her fingers gently. Then let's see if we can get you to do it again. And just like that, the space between them began to shift less like a divide, more like a doorway neither of them had realized was already open. Fallon stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, her breath catching as she looked out over the city. Westmont's lights twinkled below, modest and scattered, but the sky above them was velvet dark and full of stars. The terrace wasn't part of a hotel or a restaurant, it was part of a historic courthouse that had been converted into a civic space. Tonight, it had been rented for a fundraiser supporting local single-parent households. Harlen had been invited to speak after one of the organizers heard about his volunteer work at the youth center. He hadn't known Fallon would be there. She hadn't planned on coming until Lena sent her the flyer, pointing out that the keynote speaker's name was a little too familiar to ignore. He found her outside, his jacket over one arm and his tie loosened just enough to look like he belonged in both worlds, the gala and the garage. He stopped a few feet behind her. You always sneak out in the middle of events you helped fund, Fallon turned. Only when the speeches start sounding like campaign ads. Harlen chuckled and joined her at the railing. I didn't peg you as someone who disliked being the center of attention. I don't mind it, I just don't always trust it, he nodded. Fair, she glanced over. You were good up there, by the way. That story about coaching the kids through their first car rebuild, that was real, wasn't it? Every part, he said. We finished the engine 2 days ago. They're already arguing over who gets to drive it first. They're lucky, she said softly. To have someone like you, Harlen leaned on the railing. You didn't come here just to hear me talk. No, she admitted. I came because I've been thinking about what happens next. That sounds like the start of a conversation I should sit down for. She turned toward him fully. I think I've been dragging you into my world without asking if you even wanted to be there. He didn't answer right away. The night air curled around them, cool and quiet. I don't need any of that, he said finally. The cars, the dinners, the kind of life that comes with an assistant and 2 phones. I was happy with my world, I know. But I want to know yours, not because it's shiny, because it's yours. Her gaze dropped for a second. You're not curious about what I do. I'm curious about what keeps you up at night, what you dream about when no one's watching, what you're afraid to say out loud. Fallon looked at him then, really looked. I work with mergers. I take companies and decide which ones survive. Sometimes that means laying off hundreds. Sometimes it means doubling someone's paycheck. I make decisions most people never see. And does it ever get to you? All the time, she said, but I've never told anyone that. You just did. She stepped closer. I don't want to pretend anymore. Not with you, you haven't. I've been careful, she said, and I'm tired of being careful. He reached out, brushing her hair back from her face. Then stop. Fallon's chest rose with a sharp breath. I want you to meet my board. That caught him off guard. Why? Because they'll find out eventually, and I want them to see you the way I do. I'm not exactly the kind of guy they're used to. Exactly. You sure that's a good idea? I'm not sure about anything, she said. But I know I don't want to keep my life in 2 pieces anymore. Harlen was quiet. Then, okay, you mean that. I'll wear a tie, he said. The right size this time. Fallon laughed, the sound brighter than the night around them. I'll make sure there's something stronger than punch. He hesitated before speaking again. There's something I need to ask. Anything. Why me? Fallon didn't flinch. Because you didn't want anything from me. Not a job, not a favor. You looked at me like I was a person. Not a headline. That's all I ever saw. And it terrified me, she said, because I realized how much I wanted to be seen like that. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that felt like a promise instead of an ending. I should get back to Ellie, he said finally. She's got a science project due, and I'm the unlucky volunteer who has to help her build a solar system out of cereal boxes. Fallon grinned. Can I help? He raised an eyebrow. You sure you're ready to be covered in glitter glue and elbow-deep in glue sticks? I've faced shareholder mutinies. I think I can handle third-grade chaos. Harlen reached for her hand. Then let's go. As they walked down the stairs together, Fallon didn't feel like a billionaire. She felt like a woman who'd finally found a place where she could be real. And Harlen, every step beside her, felt like the man who could finally show her what it meant to be loved for who she was not for what she owned. Fallon stood in front of Harlen's apartment door, heart hammering harder than it had before any board meeting, acquisition, or press conference in her life. She was holding a wrapped box, not overly extravagant, but still nestled in silver paper with a navy ribbon Ellie had picked herself. Fallon had asked her what to get Harlen, and Ellie, with the blunt wisdom only a child could wield, had said, something that makes him feel seen. She knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a chaotic scene behind Harlen. A makeshift volcano, mid-eruption, was bubbling red foam onto the kitchen table, and Ellie was squealing with delight while Lena tried to contain the lava with paper towels. Harlen's shirt was streaked with food coloring, his expression caught between horror and amusement. Fallon blinked. Should I come back when your kitchen isn't under siege? Too late, Harlen said, stepping aside. You're officially part of science night. She handed him the box. This won't help with the cleanup, but I thought maybe it could go on your wall or your nightstand. Or wherever you put things that matter. He opened it slowly. Inside was a framed photo taken the night of the gala, when Ellie had wormed her way between them and asked for a picture. Harlen was mid-laugh. Fallon was looking at him. Ellie beamed in the center, glitter still stuck in her hair. He stared at it for a long beat. I didn't know this existed. I had Lena track down the photographer, Fallon said. It took 3 emails and 1 very persistent follow-up call. Harlen's throat worked. Thank you. Ellie darted over, her hands covered in dried glue. Did you bring any snacks? Only the good kind, Fallon said, pulling a container of lemon bars from her bag. Can we make more volcanoes after dessert? Ellie asked. Harlen gave her a look. Let's get through dessert first without another eruption. Ellie skipped back to the table and Fallon leaned in closer. I've been thinking, she said, keeping her voice low, about what you said on the terrace, about not needing the shiny stuff. You should know I meant it, he replied. I know, but I also know what it's like to have everything and still feel like something's missing. Harlen tilted his head. And what's missing now? Fallon hesitated. A place that feels like home. He didn't say anything right away. Then, quietly, you already have that. Right here, she swallowed hard. I didn't used to believe that. I thought home was something you bought or built, but it's not. No, he said. It's who you come back to. Fallon reached for his hand. I want to build something real with you. Not just weekends or dinners or stolen hours between meetings. I want mornings with burnt toast and school drop-offs and grocery lists written in crayon. Harlen's grip on her hand tightened. You sure? Yes. He glanced toward Ellie, who had now turned the remains of the volcano into a space station with pipe cleaners and googly eyes. She loves you, he said. You know that, right? I love her too. And me, Fallon didn't falter. More than I thought I could. The air shifted, not dramatically, just enough. Then come with me tomorrow, Harlen said. Where? There's an open field just outside town, nothing special, but Ellie and I go there sometimes on Sundays. I bring coffee. She brings every wildflower she can find. It's quiet, peaceful, Fallon smiled. Sounds perfect. The next morning, Dew still clung to the grass as Harlen spread a blanket beneath the tallest oak in the field. Ellie darted off, chasing butterflies with a paper cup while Fallon sat beside him, her heels swapped for worn sneakers he hadn't known she owned. He handed her a thermos. Careful, it's hot. She took it, their fingers brushing. I can handle it. They sat in silence for a few moments, the kind that didn't need filling. You know, Harlen said, this isn't the life most people expect when they hear the word billionaire. Fallon leaned her head against his shoulder. Good, because I've already lived the other version. This one's better. Ellie returned minutes later, her arms overflowing with wildflowers. She dropped them dramatically into Fallon's lap. For you, she announced. Because you're staying now, right? Fallon looked at Harlen, then back at Ellie. Yes, she said. I'm staying. Later that week, Fallon called a press conference, not for a company launch or a merger, for something far more personal. I've spent years building empires, she told the crowd of flashing cameras and curious reporters. But what I've found in Westmont isn't about empires. It's about coming home, and I intend to make this town part of my life permanently. She didn't name Harlen. She didn't need to. The photo of them, the same one she'd framed, was already circulating, but the real story wasn't in the headlines, it was in the quiet moments. The way Fallon moved into the apartment upstairs temporarily, insisting on keeping Ellie's bedtime routine exactly the same. The way Harlen brought her coffee every morning without asking how she took it. The way Ellie started calling her hours when talking about weekend plans. And on a crisp Saturday morning, with the first hints of spring blooming across the field where they'd first shared coffee, Harlen led Fallon by the hand to the same oak tree. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't need to. Marry me, he said simply. Let's make this our story for real. No glitter, no gala, just us. Fallon's eyes glistened. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. As Ellie ran circles around them, wildflowers in her hair, the three of them stood in the sunlight, tangled in laughter and promise. And for the first time in her life, Fallon Jensen, the woman who had once ruled boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, felt like she had everything she'd ever wanted. Love, not in the headlines, but in the home they'd built together. The courthouse lawn had never seen this many flowers. Pale lavender draped every railing, soft white petals lined the aisle, and sun filtered through the leaves of the ancient oak trees standing like silent sentinels around the crowd. Fallon adjusted the delicate strap of her dress, her fingers brushing the lace that trailed down her side. She wasn't nervous, not in the way she'd been before conferences or interviews or televised interviews with business journalists. This was a different kind of anticipation, a quiet certainty wrapped in a heartbeat. Lena stepped back after pinning the final sprig of rosemary into Fallon's bouquet. He hasn't stopped pacing, she said, her voice dry but affectionate. If he wears down the grass anymore, we'll need to replant the whole aisle. Fallon smiled without looking away from the mirror. He's not going to run, Lena. Not from you, Lena replied. But maybe from how much glitter Ellie dumped into those centerpieces. Fallon turned, finally breathing in the moment. She said it needed sparkle joy. I wasn't going to argue. Outside, Harlen stood at the top of the aisle, tugging at the sleeve of his crisp shirt. He wasn't used to tuxedos, but Fallon had insisted he wear exactly what made him feel like himself. He'd compromised with dark navy slacks and a white linen shirt rolled at the sleeves sharp, effortless, and completely him. Ellie stood just beside him, holding a small bouquet nearly half her size, her curls pinned with tiny pearl clips that glinted in the sun. When Fallon stepped out, everything fell into silence. Harlen's breath caught. Not because of the dress, though it was beautiful, or the way the light turned her skin to gold. It was the way she looked at him, steady, certain, like she wasn't walking down the aisle, she was walking home. They didn't need a long ceremony. Their vows were simple, spoken without notes. I never expected you, Fallon said, her voice clear. And I didn't know I needed you until I saw what my life looked like with you in it. Harlen's palm cradled hers. I didn't think I had room for anything more than survival, he said. And then you gave me more than I thought I deserved. The efficient didn't need to raise his voice. By the promises you've made and the love you've chosen, I now pronounce you. Ellie interrupted with a squeal. Kiss her already. The entire crowd burst into laughter, and Harlen didn't hesitate. He kissed Fallon like he'd waited a lifetime, like every past moment had led exactly here. She kissed him back with the same certainty. The reception was held in the field just beyond the courthouse, the same one where Harlen had first brought Fallon for coffee and quiet. Now it was strung with lights, long farmhouse tables lined with wildflowers, and music playing from a small stage where a local band played slow, easy melodies. Fallon danced barefoot on the grass. Harlen joined her, Ellie tucked between them, humming along to a song none of them knew but all somehow loved. Later, as the sun dipped low and the sky painted itself in hues of peach and violet, Fallon sat beside Harlen beneath the oak tree. Ellie had fallen asleep in Lena's lap nearby, one hand still gripping a half-eaten cupcake. Fallon leaned her head on Harlan's shoulder. "You never asked me." "Asked you what?" "How much I'm worth." He looked down at her. "You're not a number," she smiled. "Guess that's why I married you." He kissed the top of her head. "I know exactly what you're worth. To me, you're everything." Fallon looked out at the field, where laughter still drifted and candles flickered on the tables. "I used to think love was a distraction, that it would take me off course. And now I know it was the destination all along." Harlan's fingers laced with hers. "We're not just building a life, we're building a legacy." She turned to him. "Not the kind in boardrooms." "No," he said. "The kind in bedtime stories and early mornings and every little moment in between." A gentle breeze moved through the field, rustling the grass and carrying the soft sounds of celebration. Fallon closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the evening settle into her bones. Weeks later, they moved into a house on the edge of town. A modest craftsman with a wraparound porch, a vegetable garden Ellie insisted on planting, and a garage Harlen converted into a workshop where he taught weekend classes to local teens. Fallon opened a local chapter of her foundation, focusing on business mentorship for single parents. She split her time between Westmont and the city, but more often than not, she chose home. Ellie thrived. She painted her room coral, adopted a rabbit named Buttons, and told anyone who would listen that her parents were the coolest people alive. Harlen taught her how to ride a bike. Fallon taught her how to negotiate bedtime extensions like a pro. One night, long after Ellie had fallen asleep and the house had gone quiet, Fallon stood on the porch wrapped in a light blanket. Harlen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Still awake?" he asked. "I was just thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. "I've never been this happy," she said. "It's not loud, it's not explosive, it's just full." Harlen kissed her shoulder. "That's what real love feels like." They stood there, watching the stars stretch across the sky above their home. No gala lights, no headlines, just them, complete content. Together forever.